Hello class, and welcome back to Algebra 1B Bootcamp. Today we are solving quadratic equations in ways other than factoring or graphing. We're solving them by rooting or completing the square or quadratic formula. Whenever you're solving by rooting, your answer should always include a plus or minus because you have a parabola, and parabolas typically almost always have two solutions. So for this first one, all you have to do is square root both sides. The square root of 49 is 7, and you include your plus or minus. This next one, you divide both things by -1. So you have x squared equals 69. And so x equals plus or minus 13 when you square root both sides. The next one gets a little bit more complicated. You have to add 5 first, because your goal is to isolate the square, the x squared. 27 plus 5 is 32. Divide both sides by 2. Oops. And you get 16. Then you square root and square root. The square root of 16 is 4. And again, you include your plus or minus in your answer. The next one, subtract 75. So you have 3x squared equals -75. Divide both sides by 3, so x squared equals -25. Now, when you square both sides, and you try to put that in your calculator, the square root of -25, you get an error, so that answer is no solution. The next topic we have is completing the square. And completing the square is an area in which many of you struggle. So your steps are here. First, you want to move your number to the other side, if there is one. So you have x squared plus 2x equals 15. And then, remember, we have to find our magic number. That's why I put in a plus c and a plus c. To figure out your plus c, again, you're looking for the number that makes these three be a perfect square. Typically, what you do is take your b term, or your middle term right here, and divide it in half. And then you square it. So 2 divided by 2 is 1. 1 squared is 1. So my c value is 1. So I have x squared plus 2x plus 1 equals 15 plus 1. It is important when we do this that we put the 1 on both sides of the equation so we stay balanced. Over here, we're going to factor. They should factor to be the exact same thing. Numbers that multiply to 1 but add up to 2, just 1 and 1, which can then be written as a perfect square, binomial. On the other side, we just add them up. 15 and 1 make 16. Now, from here on out, this is an equation we know how to solve. We are going to first square root both sides. Get rid of this square. You cannot subtract the 1 right away. So we have plus or minus 4. Then, after you get rid of the parentheses, then you may subtract 1. And you have to find both answers. One answer is -1 plus 4. The other is -1 minus 4. Hence the plus or minus. So my answers are 3 and -5. Let's do another one just for practice. Here, you want to move the 6 over. Anything that does not have an x, you do not want it over here on the left. -14 minus 6 is -20. Okay, don't forget about the negative. It may or may not go away. We'll see what happens. So now we want to figure out our c, our magic number. You take 14, cut it in half. It's 7, and then you square 7. So it's 49. So x squared plus 14x plus 49 equals negative 20 plus 49. Now, you deal with each side independently, so you factor over here. And on this side, you just combine like terms, negative 20 and positive 49, make 29. Again, since these two are exactly the same, we write them as a square. Then our goal is to get rid of the parentheses by square rooting. We have x plus 7 on the left and plus or minus the square root of 29 on the right. That's a decimal. The square root of 29 is approximately 5.39. You'll put that in your calculator when you're doing it on your own. And now we move the 7 over. So my two answers are negative 7 plus 5.39 and negative 7 minus 5.39. Negative 7 plus 5.39 is negative 1.61. And negative 7 minus 5.39 is negative 12.39. And these are your two answers. When using your third option, if you're choosing not to graph, is to use the quadratic formula. Whenever you're using the quadratic formula, you want to make sure your equation is equal to 0. So this one is equal to 0, so is this one. This one is not. Then you figure out your values of your A, your B, and your C. And remember, they do go in order. So A is 2, B is 2, C is negative 12. And then you just have to plug the numbers into the formula. X equals the opposite of B plus or minus the square root of B squared minus 4 times A times C all over 2 times A. Now let's do some math. You want to simplify this part first. 2 squared minus 4 times 2 times negative 12. Again, you want to make sure that you put it in your calculator correctly. That is important. Oh, all over 2 times A. That's a 2. My apologies. So now simplify if you can. Negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 100, which is 10, divided by 2. So we have our two answers, negative 2 plus 10 over 2, and negative 2 minus 10 over 2. Negative 2 plus 10 is 8. Divide that answer by 2 and you get 4. Negative 2 minus 10 is negative 12. Divided by 2 is negative 6. And those are your two answers. On your EOC, it won't necessarily matter which way you choose to solve. So we'll go ahead and skip this one, but we'll look over here. If, let's say, you're in a situation and you're not necessarily very comfortable with using the quadratic formula or factoring or completing the square, you always have the option of putting it into your graphing calculator. Again, if you want to put an equation into your graphing calculator, you need to make sure that you are equal to 0. So you have to move anything and everything onto one side of your equation. So punch it in. 8x squared plus 6x plus 5. And then hit your graph button. A lot of times when you're solving quadratics, you're going to end up with decimals. In this particular case, if you look at the graph and you look at the picture, you'll notice the graph never crosses the x-axis. So this equation has no solution. Let's go back and look at this one now. Going back to our graphing calculator. Let's see if we can get them in the same window here. There we go. We have two x squared minus 4x plus 4. If I hit graph there, I again don't cross the x-axis. So this is again a no solution type situation. If you were to choose to use your graphing calculator and you had solutions, you would have to use the second trace option and you pick zeros and then you answer the questions.